Happy Wednesday, everybody. It's Jim, it's Amadeus, and all kinds of interesting stuff. Let's go off the top. Amadeus, just before we went on, we talked about the Texas A&M Aggies having interest in landing another big fish coach, and that would be Dabo Sweeney from Clemson.
Yeah, very interesting news there. Obviously, Clemson hasn't been great. I could definitely see Dabo being out the door there, but it's an interesting move for sure because you've talked a lot about the recruiting class for
Mm-hmm.
Texas A&M, and that's right up Dabo's alley. Obviously, as a guy who
Mm-hmm.
doesn't love to use the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm. Well, my guess is he's also going to be given a good enough budget that he can hire the the coordinators that he couldn't hire at Clemson, and I think that's going to be some of his biggest situations is he's going to want to hire some coaches that right now he can't. What that does do, and let's just play this out for just a second. If Dabo Sweeney leaves Clemson, all right, and we know that Florida State is doing everything humanly possible to claw their way out of the ACC, where's that put Clemson?
That's a very good question, Jim, because obviously this is a team that hasn't been good over the last few
Right.
years now, not just this year, and obviously
Mm-hmm.
they're not a ranked team either. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they would definitely have to make a splash in the coaching market if Dabo Sweeney leaves, if they want to consider themselves as
Mm-hmm.
a top team in the country and try to get out of that ACC with Florida State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't. I think that look, Clemson's a great job, but Clemson is a small school. It's in South Carolina, and if it were not for first Tommy Bowden and then you know uh, what Dabo's done, it's been they've been a school on the rise for the past decade, but you know again they've fallen off the map a little bit. They could go into that same malaise Florida State did before before they went out and got their guy in in Mike Norville. So it could be an interesting way to go, but I do think that if Dabo takes the plunge to Texas A&M, it's going to put Clemson in a precarious situation, and it's going to devalue Clemson to a point where Florida State and maybe North Carolina might be the only two teams in the ACC that could garner interest in one of the big conferences.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So it'll be interesting to watch the Clemson situation going
Mm-hmm.
forward. Obviously, Dabo's not done there yet,
No,
but
he's not. He's not out the door. We haven't. This is just speculation. We're just saying that, but it's an interesting job. Clemson's an interesting job, but it's a big name, but it's a small town, a small school, and we'll have to see what kind of money they put forward. Now, last night technically, the new college football playoff rankings came out. Georgia number one, reclaiming that over Ohio State. These are 10-0 teams. Michigan 10-0 at 3, Florida State 10-0 at 4, Washington 10-0 at 5. Oregon moved up to number 6 ahead of Texas at 9-1. Texas at 7 at 9-1. Alabama 9-1 at 8. Missouri at 8-2 at 9, and Louisville, who Florida State will likely play in Charlotte in the ACC championship game, is in the number 10 slot there. And it's going to be a fascinating situation because you got Ohio State playing Michigan. Okay, that's going to be the championship. Well, that's going to be the game. The annual rivalry game. Florida State will have to play Louisville in the ACC championship game. We expect that Oregon and Washington will probably play each other in the Pac-12 title game. So that basically means that the top 6 teams, with the exception of Georgia, who will get uh, probably Alabama in the SEC title game, that means that all of the top 8 teams, without Texas, will be in a title game where they will play a team that is either above them or below them in the standings 1 through 8.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be it's definitely getting interesting coming down the stretch here.
Mm-hmm.
You know me, Jim. I love chaos, so
That's right.
I'm rooting for that. I'm rooting for the Oregon win against Washington. Give them both 1 losses.
Right.
I'm rooting for the obviously Ohio State to lose to Michigan there
Right.
to throw that wrench. It would be funny to see Michigan lose in the Big Ten championship to Iowa.
Right.
That would be interesting there. And then what if Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC championship? That would bring a ton of chaos, I think. So that's what I'm rooting for myself, Jim.
I will tell you that if Alabama beats Georgia, I'll make this prediction right now. Alabama beats Georgia, the SEC gets 2 teams in the title, in the Final Four.
Yeah, I see. That would be ridiculous. I think in that.
I'm not saying it's not ridiculous. I'm just saying I think the way that Greg Sankey, who is the commissioner of the SEC, and the weight that he has, I just see that that's a possibility.
Yeah, that would be ridiculous. I think in that scenario where you pretty much have no undefeated teams
Mm-hmm.
there, I would go with just the conference championship, the conference
Right.
champions from each conference.
Right. Well, I would have to leave out the Big 12.
Obviously, that was implied. I don't
Okay,
think
sorry,
the Big
didn't mean
12
to.
Yeah, no, the Big 12 is not a strong conference this year,
Mhm.
and you know how I feel about Texas,
Mhm.
the strongest team in the conference right now, as it seems.
Right. So in that case, we would have, I guess, we'd have Alabama, right? Because they would be the champion. We'd have Michigan because they would be the champion. We'd have Florida State because they would be the champion, and we would have, we'll say Oregon or Washington. Well, if it's going to be Oregon because of chaos, Oregon in there. And I would say if that's my Final Four, I'm going to go with Oregon and Michigan. I'm sorry, Oregon and Alabama to play in the title game.
Yeah, definitely.
If they don't end up in 1 and 4 playing each other.
Yeah, and I think Oregon would probably have a good chance of just winning that whole thing. What'll be interesting to me though, is I want to see if 2 Big Ten teams get in the top 4, just because.
Ugh.
Like I bet you, if Michigan were to lose to Ohio State at the end of the season, that's it. That their season's done. Ohio State is going to win the Big Ten championship, and they'll be the only Big Ten team in the playoffs. But if Michigan beats Ohio State and they go on to win the Big Ten championship, they'll still find a way to shoehorn Ohio State in there, and that's why the college football playoffs is a joke.
Right.
It's more of an invitational than the actual playoffs.
Right. I mean, it just Ohio State tends to get there regardless of whether they deserve it or not. And to be honest, they haven't deserved it in the past couple of years, but they're there. So we will see. And that would likely leave Florida State on the outside looking in. They could be an undefeated team, not in the Final Four.
Because you got to shoehorn Ohio State in there somehow.
Right, and you can't. I mean, what you got to take Oregon over Florida State? I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. You would take Oregon over Florida State. I would do that, but I don't know that. I mean, that one might be a situation where they go FSU and keep Oregon out.
Yeah, that could definitely be a thing too, right? It all depends. Like we said, because Washington has that regular season win, I think you can't keep them out of the playoffs if they win the Pac-12 championship. If they are literally undefeated and they beat Oregon twice, including the Pac-12 championship, there's no scenario you can describe to me that keeps Washington out of the college football playoffs this year.
Well, here's a stat that I would use. to make my case. Oregon and Washington, at the end of the season, when they play in the championship game, both of those teams will have played 6 ranked teams. Nobody on that list, 1 through 10, has played 6 ranked teams.
Yeah, and that's not even including some of the teams that aren't even ranked, that have been ranked in the Pac-12. This was the strongest conference to start the season. The only conference that went undefeated in the first week. Now, obviously, things have shook out a little differently there. Washington State wasn't as good as they looked early on, but still, this was a very strong conference. I mean, look at some of the teams in it. So,
we talked about Arizona yesterday. We talked about Arizona. Nobody expected Arizona was going to be there, but they are.
Exactly, and they've been killing it. And then you have you got a big matchup this week with UCLA and USC. Neither of those teams are even ranked now. So just think about that. And again, those are teams. Well, at least USC is a team that Washington and Oregon beat. And
they were in the top 10 when they beat them.
Yeah, so I don't know how you keep the Pac-12 out of the playoffs this year, but if we know the college football committee,
they'll figure out a way. Yeah,
they'll find a way. We'll have like 2. If Florida State will miss it too, we'll have if Alabama beats Georgia, as you said, we'll get Alabama and Georgia in the final or in the college football playoffs, and then we'll get the Big Ten champion Michigan, and we'll shoehorn Ohio State.
Stayed in there, right?
That'll be your playoffs. 2 Big Ten teams and 2 SEC teams. Half of them don't deserve to be there, but that's what we're going with.
Right, because they know that the ratings. I mean, those 4 teams, in all honesty, those 4 teams, if it was Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, would crush ratings-wise. There's no question about it.
Yeah, definitely. It all boils down to the ratings.
We're going into the time when they're negotiating a new contract, so ratings do matter. Now, I would argue that Oregon, Florida State, Washington, Texas, even. They're gonna, they'll bring you eyeballs. There's no question about that. But will they bring you Ohio State, Michigan eyeballs? No, they won't. That's just the way it is. Every year, in the last 10 years, the number 1 rated college football game has been Ohio State, Michigan.
Yep.
So
that's why they want to shoehorn both of them into the playoffs.
And the championship games between Georgia and Alabama have been in the top 2 or 3. So, yeah, there's no question about it. I guarantee you that Florida State Louisville is not going to make a big, splash on in that championship game. Oregon, Washington might. They might do well. But we have to see how that plays out. No question about it. So that's your top 10 in the college football playoffs. As of this week. But, anything can happen. All right, let's move over to something that you now have delved into quite deeply, and that is college basketball. The Kansas Jayhawks are your number 1 team. They will be playing, their next game isn't until the 20th, a 9 p.m. game. They'll be playing at home. I'm sorry, they're on the road to Chaminade, so they can play a game in Hawaii. Purdue is number 2 from the Big Ten. Their next game, again, it's a game that's coming up on the 20th. It's a 5 o'clock game, part of a doubleheader. Purdue is taking on Gonzaga. That game will be at Gonzaga, but I think it's a neutral site game. Arizona, 2-0 of the Pac-12. They're number 3 in the country. They're going to be hosting Belmont. That's 17th, which, of course, is a Friday night, and that'll be 11 o'clock. Marquette's number 2. I'm sorry, I'm saying can't count. They're at home to UCLA. UConn, number 5. They're at Indiana. That game's on the 19th. Houston is at Towson. That game, interestingly enough, in Baltimore, that game's going to be played actually tomorrow night in Towson at 6:30. Number 7, Tennessee at the Q's. Got two orange teams playing each other. That's going to be on the 20th, and that's a 2:30 game. And then Creighton is at Texas Southern, and that game is on the 18th at 11:30 p.m. And the final two is Duke, which is playing Bucknell. That's going to be played at Camden Indoor Arena on the 17th. And on the 18th, it's going to be Florida Atlantic hosting Bryant. So that's your top 10 teams in college basketball. And I mean, this is totally meaningless this early in the season to have these top 10 teams in here. But what are some of the teams that you look forward to watching this year?
Yeah, so the first thing that jumps out to me is just, especially with the preseason rankings we had, is the disrespect for UConn, your defending national champions. You know, every year it seems the last few years, it's always Kansas comes out as the number one team. But yeah, UConn is not even the highest ranked team in the Big East, and I find that very disrespectful. Marquette is a very good team.
Yeah.
I love this team last year. I love what Shaka Smart's been doing. I think they're only going to get better this year. But, you know, until they beat UConn, and I know they are, technically they won the Big East tournament, but they didn't win the Big East regular season. And obviously UConn won the national championship. So I would still give a little bit more respect to UConn there. The other team, I think, should be a bit higher than what they actually are, is FAU, specifically because this is a team obviously made a magical run to go to the Final Four this year or last year, but they were also they're returning over 90% of their lineup pretty much. So this is an FAU team that's pretty much the exact same last year. They're in a new conference this season, so you know they're going to come out and have a point to prove, right? Trying to win the new conference in their first year. So yeah, I really like this FAU team. I think they're a team to watch this
The
year.
FAU team, another reason that you might be interested in the FAU team is, unlike a lot of teams, they're big. I mean, they got a front line that's an NBA front line, and that, you know, not for nothing. I mean, guard play is very important, no question about it, and they got some pretty decent guards. But you got the bigs there. They just dominate the boards, and they're very, very talented team. So, and I echo what you say about Shaka Smart. A lot of people thought that when he went from VCU to Marquette that wasn't going to be a good thing because they felt that Shaka was, you know, a very good mid-major coach. But, you know, whenever he stepped up to the Big East and to Marquette, it's a lot harder to get kids to go to Milwaukee, Wisconsin and play. But Shaka Smart has been very good at both recruiting as also working the portal. So Shaka's done very well. UConn, you're right. I mean, UConn has a history, and how you disrespect that history, I don't know. I mean, they're multiple national champions winners, and you know, both in men's and women's basketball. So there's the one team that I think is overrated in that top 10 that we looked at is Houston. I don't think they're as good as the number 6 team in the country. They lost players from last year's team. They should have had that team should have been playing in Houston, frankly, in the Final Four, and they didn't get there. I just don't know that they're in a top 10 team yet.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I would even throw Duke into that conversation.
Yeah.
Duke already suffered the loss at home to Arizona this year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, Arizona, very good team.
Sure.
They came into the season, I think, ranked 12th. But Tommy Lloyd, he's another one. They've had a history, Arizona, of being very very competitive in the national championship the last few years. They've been a very good team. So I think Duke is a bit overrated just because it's not the same. Obviously, they have that home loss, which is
sure.
It's not like it was on a neutral site. It was
right.
at home for Duke. And this is only what the second season with their new coach
Mm-hmm.
there, John
Yep.
Shire. This is
Mm-hmm.
not the same. This is not the same Duke team as years past. It's not even the same players anymore. So now we're kind of getting in. Like last year was a bit of you obviously still had some players from the Coach K era, but this is more of a now he's really establishing the John Shire era, and
Mm-hmm.
I think Duke's going to take a bit of a step back this year.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not Coach K, and can Duke recruit without Coach K? Yes. Can they recruit to be a national champion? Not so fast. We'll have to prove that. I think the interesting thing to me of the top 10 is three of them there are all Big East teams. Creighton's a Big East team. They're ranked number 8. Of course, we talked about UConn at 5 and Marquette at 4. So it just goes to prove what a power conference that you know the Big East is, and you gotta we look at all these other power conferences, and people say, well, the Big 12 is the toughest basketball conference. Well, if the Big 12 is the toughest basketball conference, then why are 3 teams from the Big East in the top 10?
Yeah, I definitely think it's actually the Big East that's the best basketball conference, and it's not just those 3 teams. Like if you look at the other one, Providence was a very good team last year.
Sure.
Obviously, Ed Cooley's gone now, but they're off to what a 3-0 start this year. So
Yeah.
there's some very good teams in the Big East for sure. Now there's some very bad teams as well. Obviously, you got Georgetown and DePaul in there who seem to lose every game, but Patrick Ewing's
Hmm.
gone at Georgetown, so maybe new era for them, right? This is a very good conference. Obviously, now the Rick Pitino era has started in St. John's as well,
Right.
so they're not there yet from what I saw against Michigan the other night, but
Hmm.
they have the potential. Maybe they work themselves into the rankings near the end of the season as they put things together. So yeah, I think the Big East is going to be definitely one of the, if not the toughest conference in basketball this year.
Well, I remember the heyday of the Big East. I used to do those games, and that was when Rick Pitino was coaching Providence, and you had PJ, Clarissimo at Seton Hall. You had George, big John Thompson at Georgetown. You had Boeheim at Syracuse. You had Louis Carnesecca at St. John's. You had shoot, Raleigh Massimino at Villanova. I mean, you had coaches that were phenomenal coaches, in that conference, and it was every week was another fascinating game, and some big. As John Thompson used to say when they played basketball, because most of those kids were from the big cities, right? So it was like no blood, no foul. These guys are used to playing out in concrete, on the asphalt, playgrounds, in the Bronx, or in Philly or someplace like that. So it was a physical, league. But man, did they have some coaches and some players in that league.
Yeah, they've historically been a very good
Hmm.
league. So definitely something to look at there. I think the Big East is the conference to watch this year.
Well, we talked about Coach K being gone. Boeheim is gone at Syracuse. I'm just wondering how much longer that Tom Izzo wants to hang on at Michigan State. They're number 18 in the country, but he's been there for a very long time.
Yeah, and they already have a loss at home to James Madison this year.
Hmm.
So turns out James Madison is just the best football and basketball team in the country. But
Right.
yeah, I'm with you. You got to think Michigan State. I mean, they weren't really that great last year.
Hmm.
Yeah, they were ranked, but they weren't like top 10 team,
Hmm.
and nobody was really talking about them until they got into the tournament, and they went on that bit of a run there. But
Hmm.
even so, they did take out some very good teams. But even though
Hmm.
once again they underperformed in the tournament, and
Right.
yeah, you got to be asking yourself with this start to the season now. Home loss to James Madison right off the bat. You're
Hmm.
already out of the top 10. Now you got to work your way back in. Yeah, it makes you wonder how long Izzo's got there.
Well, and then there's James Madison, who's who's in the top 25. They're at 24, and they're 3-0. So like you said, they're picking up where the football team left off, and they're in the Sun Belt, and we'll have to see how far they can move. But they have not shied away from playing big time basketball teams.
Yeah, that whole school is just angry right now. I wonder what their other sports are doing too. Like, do they have a
Right.
top volleyball team or a soccer team or something?
Who knows? I mean, they're. I mean, I will say this: James Madison has always, back when they were an FBS team, right? They excelled in all of their athletics. They didn't really have a clunker in the bunch. They were always competitive in everything, and they used to play in the old they played in the Colonial Athletic Conference, and were always competitive in those in everything they played in. So when they decided to move to the Division One, I wasn't surprised that they were a team that was competitive. I just wasn't. I was just surprised that they were this competitive, this tough, this early.
Yeah, no, they've come out with like a point to prove, or something.
Hmm.
Something's going on over at James Madison. Don't be sleeping on JMU this year
No, 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 no. And
in
so
any sport.
no,
No, national
yeah,
lacrosse champions.
right. Look out for them. Actually, lacrosse. They do have a pretty good lacrosse team.
Do they? Of course they
Yeah.
do, Jim. What else do they not have? Like, what don't they have a good team in?
Yeah. By the way, teams receiving votes: Memphis, Virginia, St. John's, UCLA, TCU, San Diego State, darlings from last year, BYU, St. Mary's, who got bounced the other night, Mississippi State, Iowa State, Wisconsin, Auburn, Michigan, Weber State, Drake, Boise State, and Clemson. Those are teams that received votes in this week's poll. Question for you. On the women's side, is there much of from a gaming standpoint, is there much of a movement in women's college basketball?
Yeah, there's not really. It's definitely not as popular as the men's.
Right.
If I wanted to give out a women's college basketball play, I wouldn't be able to give it out at most of the sites I'm on. I would probably have to custom pick it.
Mm-hmm.
At Big Al's, I would be able to custom pick it, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I wouldn't be able to have it at the Insiders Room. It's not something that a lot of sites offer. I mean, if there's definitely a betting market for it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not one of those things where like the FCS games
Mm-hmm.
in football where you got to wait till day of for the lines to
Mm-hmm.
come out, or a lot of times they're not focused on it. The women's lines are out. You can definitely be betting on them every day, and if you follow the women's basketball very well, and you know who's good and who's not, you can definitely find some value and some you can definitely find some value in the lines and make some money on that just with mismatches. But you really got to know your stuff on the women's side. The women's basketball is not something I follow particularly.
What's interesting to me is the last 2 years their ratings have been phenomenal. Now you wonder if that has to do with Sue Bird at Iowa and what she's doing. Certainly, LSU and that team has just gone bonkers. South Carolina's always been good. UCLA and Stanford from the last year of the Pac-12, and just like Utah as well. So it's an interesting conference. I'm sorry, an interesting deal with the ratings going up and all that. I was just curious if sometimes when ratings and more eyeballs are on a sport, you tend to see anyway that translates into the wagering world. But I guess it's a little bit of a lag there.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of sites just don't offer it. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of sites don't offer there's a few sites out there, the Insiders Room as well.
Mm-hmm.
They only offer Premier League and MLS, so even their soccer leagues are lacking in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
So So yeah, a lot of sites they'll view it as, you know, if do we think it's going to sell? Do people want to bet on that? And because you have to pay for the line feeds as well, right? If you want to offer the sport.
Uh huh.
So it's one of those things where you can definitely find people giving out free college basketball plays for the women on Twitter or wherever you get your free plays from. I'm sure people give them out. You
Mm-hmm.
won't find a ton of premium plays on it. If I had to guess, your best bet is probably to follow a good WNBA handicapper, because that might be somebody who looks more into the women's basketball and bets it just for personal reasons and for fun. Because obviously, if you're handicapping the WNBA at that kind of level, then you got it. You're gonna pay attention to, obviously, you know, the draft and things like that. So they're going to be paying attention to what women's schools are good and stuff like that. So yeah, if
Mm-hmm.
you're looking to bet on women's basketball, I would
Mm-hmm.
say find somebody who's good in WNBA and ask them if they follow women's college basketball, if you can.
Mm-hmm. Do You brought up the WNBA. Has the WNBA began to make a mark in the wagering aspect?
Yeah, so WNBA is definitely something you can give out, and it's a very particular thing. Not every handicapper gives it out. I personally don't give out WNBA, but Rye Cape gives out WNBA. I know a ton of handicappers that do give it out, and the sites do tend to offer the WNBA. So if you're looking for premium plays on WNBA, you will definitely be able to find them at most of the sites. I think all of them really, but yeah, most of the sites you'll be able to get WNBA premium plays for sure. And you never know, in
Mm-hmm.
years, as you said, if the ratings are improving, maybe that's something that trickles down to the sites
Mm-hmm.
where the demand for women's college basketball becomes
Mm-hmm.
higher. And once they know more people are willing to bet on it, then yes, it will 100% be offered.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jerry wants to know, what about the pity party for Jim Harbaugh after Michigan had its win? It was odd. Um, I don't really have a pity party personally for Jim. I just, you know, Jerry, as you probably know, because we've talked about it a lot here, Amadeus and I don't think he's going to be there. I think that he's got his eye going toward an NFL job, and that there'll be some NFL teams that will be happy to have him. I don't think he wants to put up with this mess that he's in right now at Michigan, and I think that Michigan feels that they might have found, you know, a landing spot here where they can let Jim go, maybe not have to worry about his contract, and you know, and life will be okay. Yeah, I find the the sob stories a little hollow with regard to Jim. You know, with the stealing of the signs and all that sort of stuff. I just think this is the kind of crazy that that Jim didn't sign up for, and I don't think, you know, Jim's not the most tolerable person out there. I'm trying to be polite. So I just don't see him being overly. It's hard to have sympathy for Jim. He makes it hard on himself. So I don't sympathize with him, and you know, the football team he's put together seems to be able to win without him. As a matter of fact, I think they haven't lost a game when Jim has not coached them. Well, they
Yeah.
haven't lost a game this season, so I guess that would make it simple. But you know, going back to last year, I mean, Jim began to get antsy at the end of last year, and there were some people who thought he might not, you know, might get out while the getting's good. And that might be the case this time around. He may take that out just because if he leaves, maybe he will feel that some of the things that are going to happen to the team won't happen if he goes, and maybe that'll be a negotiation point. I don't know, but I don't think I think Michigan might have found a way to get out from under a contract. Uh, you know, with it, but I'm curious with regard to you know, Jim's future and where he might land. it's going to be an interesting thing to say the least.
Yeah, personally, I think it's a little ridiculous what's going on. I'm personally, especially with everything that's going on, I'm personally rooting for Michigan to be the Big Ten team in the college
Yeah, I
football.
know.
I would like to see them do well now. And I think it's pretty obvious just by the way I talk that I kind of like Michigan a lot more than I like Ohio State. But now that all that being said, I'm with you, Jerry. That was very weird for Sharon to do that. I don't know what the sobbing speech was about. But by the end of it, I wasn't even sure if he was crying, because at the end he was kind of just like grabbing Blake Corum and being like, "You finish the interview, I'm out of here," and he's just like bawling his eyes out while trying to push Corum into the interview. And even Corum was smirking a bit, like he knew what Sharon was doing. And
Right.
But yeah, so the way he said bawling his eyes, we effing love you, man. Like, we did this for you. It's just a lot of weird things he said in that speech for
Yeah.
sure. I did not get it, and I did not think it was an appropriate reaction to you beat Penn State. Relax. It's not even your toughest game of the season. You
Right.
still have to see Ohio State at the end. And even the look on Corum's face was like, "Coach, relax."
Yeah.
It's
Just calm
just
down.
Penn
Calm
State.
down. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I'm with you, Jerry. Very odd for that sobbing speech.
Right. And the thing was, yeah, Sharon Moore. I think that if Michigan ball were to move on, Sharon would be happy to, and I think Michigan would be happy to keep him on as head coach.
Yeah, probably. I mean, hey, he showed it on the weekend. We can go into Penn State. We don't even have to throw the ball to beat your ass.
Right. We can do whatever we want to and still win. So there's that to keep track of. The other thing too is he might be, now of course he's not a big name, but he might be somebody that ends up in the conversation for the Texas A&M job.
Possibly. I mean, we'll have to see. I don't know if they want to pay that much money for.
Oh, they won't have to pay that kind of money for Sharon Moore.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, do you want to shell out $100 million for an unproven coach?
No,
I feel
you don't have to
Texas
need no.
A&M is looking for the big guy, right? They're looking for the splash coach.
Mm-hmm. But they may look at it from a standpoint of Sharon. The beauty of Sharon Moore is his recruiting prowess. Okay, he brings the top recruits to Michigan, and then basically puts them in Jim Harbaugh's office for the close.
And then Harbaugh buys them cheeseburgers.
Yeah, he's the guy that gets he's the guy who gets the close. So Sharon Moore, we talked about recruits, and we talked about the importance of what Jimbo Fisher had done at A&M. I would think that Sharon could keep that train rolling, and especially given the fact that Texas A&M has a ton of NIL money, and that's not for nothing. That's something you really look at and go, So I wouldn't rule him out either as Michigan's head coach if Jim does move on, or if Jim for whatever reason decides to stay. The possibility that he lands a big time job, whether it's at A&M or there's going to be some other big openings, and he quite frankly could land there. We'll see.
Yeah. It's going to be a lot to watch. We're not even done the regular season, and we're already talking about.
We're already talking
Aussie.
about people's lives. Yeah, I did make an inquiry about what's going on at the University of Florida with deciding whether Billy Napier is going to be back. And the theory of the case there is they looked at Mike Norvell at Florida State. And they'll be playing Florida State in a couple weeks. And they saw that Florida State didn't get too quick on the trigger from Norvell. and they thought, okay, well now Mike has got things moving in the right direction. The team's potential to play in a championship series is good. They definitely at the way things are going at the moment have to be considered the ACC dominant football team for at least the next few years. So it's a trend up for Mike Norvell. So I think they decided, okay, look, there's big time recruiting class coming in, and maybe we'll give him another year to see how things work out. So we'll see. I think that's going to be another things to keep an eye on. What some of these schools who are concerned about what's going on at their universities, and you know who pulls the trigger on some of this stuff. I don't know, but I do believe Sharon Moore is either staying at Michigan or he's got a very good opportunity. He could go over to Michigan State, to be honest. That's a possibility. If he wanted to stay in the state, he wouldn't even have to move. He could just, take the 90-mile drive from Ann Arbor over to East Lansing.
That would be interesting. That would be
Well,
very interesting.
it's we'll have to see what Detroit Lenny kind of odds he puts on it.
Well, especially with the way he was talking about the Michigan athletic director and everybody else in his sobbing speech. I mean, I don't
Uh,
think he's betraying them and going to Michigan State the
oh
way he's
man,
talking, but you never know, I guess.
yeah. I mean, it's now they had to shell out. Michigan State had to shell out some money, not Jimbo Fisher money, but they shelled out some money on that one. But it'll be interesting. It'll definitely be interesting to what Sharon does, and frankly, what the rest of them do.
Yeah, I
Um,
even saw a headline, I think on like Bleacher Report, where it was like Deion Sanders to Texas A&M. What would you think of that one, Jim?
uh, I think Dion needs a couple more years at Colorado to get you know the the the, the honeymoon there. It will last for a while. Okay, Dion is Dion, and Dion will bring players. There's no question about that. I don't think. I think one of the things about Dion that makes him smart is that he understands that making a jump to a Texas A&M means he's got to win right now. And I don't know that Dion. I mean, are the players there? Probably, but are the players there that play Dion's style? Probably not, because Jimbo Fisher's going to recruit a different type of player than plays well in a system that the Coach Prime has. So I would think he would be tempted, but I don't think that. I think Dion's going to hang in Boulder for a while and see how that plays out. Because overall, at the end of the day, if he can be successful at Colorado, then I think he personally will feel better at where the next job is going to be. Because right now, they started off really well, and then it's not been an easy ride for Colorado since they started playing some pretty good teams. So I think Coach Prime's going to want to stay at least a couple years there to get a feel for big time college football, and I think that the Big 12, think about it. I mean, the Big 12 is going to add Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado to the already they're losing Texas A&M. I'm sorry, Texas and Oklahoma. So, I mean, it's not that outrageous to think that Prime could have a playoff team in Colorado as soon as next year.
Yeah, it could happen. Definitely, it'll be interesting. I thought it was interesting just because I feel I'm with you. I don't think he would go because
Mm-hmm.
the whole thing came up to FBS and why he picked
Sure.
Colorado because the big schools didn't give him a chance, and so he
Mm-hmm.
wanted to show, I'm a good coach. I can turn around, this
Right.
dog that program that wins one game every year,
Right.
and bring him in. Sure enough, he hit the over,
Yep.
and
No question.
we're not at a bowl game, but that'll be next step.
Mm-hmm.
And look at, I think Jed Fish is the perfect example, right? Jed
Mm-hmm.
Fish is the only coach to actually say something nice about Dion after playing him this year.
Right.
Because when they asked him about, because after Arizona beat Colorado this week,
Sure.
when they asked Jed Fish about it, Fish said, if I'm a Colorado fan, I'm not worried. They got a fantastic coach in Dion's
Mm-hmm.
head because he knows he just went through.
Yeah.
He just went through it the last 3 years, and we've talked a lot about how Jed Fish was the original Dion, where when he
Right.
got there 3 years ago,
Right.
they had the most, hello, my
Right.
name is people
Right.
on the team.
Right. They had to have a mixer just to keep everybody, who's here and what are you doing. And so, yeah, I mean, and look at how he succeeded at Arizona.
Exactly, right. So I think Jed Fish is the prime example that it for any of these coaches, right? Like it takes time. Even with Napier at Florida, right? You can apply it
Right.
to any of these schools. You can't just come in and win now unless it's like a Texas A&M who has the money to buy players and
Right.
then and that's why I think it would be interesting if Dion went there because he would be given the tools to win now. It's not just the expectation, but he would here's the blank check, go get the players you need. We have the money, right? We have the support, everything you need. So it would be interesting to me because he would be put in a better position to win now. And it would be interesting to see what he does with that.
The one thing, if I would think this, okay, if that Texas A&M job came open 2 years from now, right, where he's had 3 years at Colorado, and he's had success, I think you'd take it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Because he's from, he lives in Texas. He knows how to recruit Texas. But here's the thing that would drive people nuts. And that is Texas A&M has always been the second, the second child to the University of Texas. If Dion shows up in College Station, then nobody shows up in Austin from a standpoint of national media. It's like, who cares about them? Dion would pull some serious interest into College Station and make it a happening every week that they would play. He would probably hire DJ Khaled with the kind of NIL money that they have to DJ at the stadium every football game. So it would be a very interesting thing. I just think the timing is just a little bit off for Dion at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he probably feels the same way where he needs.
It's a shame.
A few years in FBS.
It's a shame because honestly, I would love to see that. I would love to see Dion at Texas A&M and see what he would do.
Well, maybe you never know, right? Maybe he takes the job at Alabama when Saban's done. They
oh my God,
the Aflac commercials together, so they're tight. And maybe Saban's already told him, hey, I think I'm going to be done soon. So you want the Alabama job? And
that would be
when your contract's up.
That would be amazing. That would be totally amazing. Dion at Alabama. Wow. I mean, that would be. I'll tell you what would be hilarious about it. What would be hilarious about it would be the fact that Auburn turned him down.
Yeah. That would be.
That would be okay. Auburn turns me down. I'm gonna go take Coach Saban's. And he says, "Oh yeah, he's got the receipts, and he's gonna beat them bad." And the funny thing is that Dion has mentioned on numerous occasions how one of the reasons he decided to take the Aflac commercials was because he wanted to have the opportunity to spend time with Nick. And, he and Nick have become really close. And he said that he said during press conferences that Saban has texted him plays and things like that he thought would be interesting. And he's sent him some game tape on some of the teams that they're going to end up playing. And, you got to look at it and go, wow, here's a guy who's doing really well. And in Saban, who's an icon in college sports, And what better way of doing it than passing on the blue jacket from one Aflac pitchman to the other? I like that. That's one that we'll keep an eye on there, man. That's
I'm not putting
something.
the tinfoil hat on just yet,
No,
Jim.
no, but
Just throwing
it's.
it out there.
I like that. I like that. That's thinking outside the box. I think that's Otani to the Giants. That's kind of that's the kind of thing that I'm not so sure that it. I'm curious as to how the Alabama fans would handle it, but after they get over the initial shock, I think they would be fine.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, right? He attracts players. Nick
Mm-hmm.
Saban's not a guy that he's kind of like a Dabo Sweeney. He doesn't use the transfer portal a ton.
Right.
So it would definitely bring, maybe they can get a quarterback now with Dion there.
Oh,
right?
that would be skilled players would be no problem. Skilled
Yeah,
players
so
would
I
not
think
be a serious problem at all.
that might actually fix the issue you're seeing at Alabama now. Because Saban's a great coach, but I think, the fact that he doesn't use the transfer portal and he sticks to the recruiting guns has hurt him a bit in the last few years.
Right. And it's hurt him at those positions, at that position, and it's going to be interesting. But it's a fascinating thought. I really like it a lot, because the other thing that Saban has been able to do, and his team has been able to do, and it's the same thing, frankly, that Kirby Smart has done. It's hard. People forget that you win with good offensive and defensive lines. And that's where Saban has done really excelled. He and Kirby Smart have both excelled. They got some big dudes that live in the Southeast, in Alabama, in Texas, and in Florida, around that whole area, Georgia, and they're able to get the bigs. So you don't have to worry about the quarterbacks down there getting knocked down. They protect them pretty well, and Saban has been really good about. It's funny, his defensive coordinator used to be Kirby Smart, who's the guy who got all those guys. Now Kirby's getting them, but he's getting them and putting them in Georgia. So I think the combination of Dion being able to go out and get the skill players and work the portal to get those kind of skill players is one thing. The one thing you don't seem to be able to do in college sports is get the big linemen out of the portal. That's something that we have yet to see. There's just not that many of them, and I think that's the critical part.
Well, Dion's already talked about hiring Warren Sapp next year, right? So that might be something to.
It's not going to hurt. Yeah.
Intrigue, because I would assume if he. Obviously, a lot of ifs here, but if he takes the Alabama job with Saban Lee is right, he would want to bring a few of his coaches with him. I would assume Warren Sapp's one of those guys. And then, now you have somebody to entice the big guys to come, because it's like, oh, why wouldn't you want to go play for a legend at the position itself?
A man who's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
so
learn a lot.
Yeah, I know. I know the guy who made the speech. What happens at the NFL, at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the voting is done by a group of writers or broadcasters that represent the 32 teams of the NFL. And Ira Kaufman is the guy who represents the Buccaneers, and Ira is the guy who has to make the pitch for. I mean, you can make the pitch for anybody. If he wanted to make a pitch for Brett Favre, he could have done that, but usually it's the home guy. And so he wanted to figure out what to do to make the pitch for Warren to get in the hall, and it was kind of a tough sell, because Warren wasn't exactly good to the press. Okay, he liked to speak his mind, but most of the time it was on social media or it was somewhere that the press wasn't. So It wasn't necessarily he was the best buddy of the press. So, and press being the way they are, they tend to, to hold a grudge, whether it's right or wrong. And so, he makes the a phone call out to to Los Angeles and talks to a couple of his old former, teammates and says, Keyshawn Johnson, one of them, and said, Keyshawn, what is Warren should Warren be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame? He said, absolutely. He says, he's a jerk, but he should be there. He said, nobody said you don't have to be a polite guy. He says, he's a pain in the ass, but by all means, he deserves it. So, long story short, Ira incorporates the conversation with Keyshawn Johnson in his pitch, and lo and behold, they nail it down, and Warren gets in. So Warren Sapp would be. I don't think that there'd be many kids that would tell Warren Sapp no if he's recruiting.
Definitely.
So, and you got another guy who has talked to Dion about eventually becoming a coach, and that's Ed Reed. And so you've got another. I mean, it's ironic that you got an FSU coach in Dion, and you got two guys who played in Miami who want to get in on the act. So it'll be interesting how that plays out. But anyway, that's we'll see. But I do like the idea that one Aflac spokesman succeeds another one at Alabama.
Yeah,
Mark, put a pin in that one.
Trade in the buffalo for an elephant.
Right. Put a little pin in that one. We'll save that one for 2 or 3 years down the line. See where that's at. So there you go. Okay, buddy. We're getting that time of day where it's time to talk about where we can find your picks and all the interesting and fun stuff.
Yeah, you can get my premium plays at BigHal.com here, PickAdvisor.com, and TheInsidersRoom.com. All of those links are in the description below. You can check out my premium plays for tonight. I got a college football up, as well as 2 NBA and 2 college basketball. Not coming off a great day, went 2-5 yesterday, but we're bouncing back today. I did cash my non-conference game of the month in college basketball with Marquette yesterday, so that's good, and we're looking to extend the 11-3 college basketball run tonight. So go check that out.
One quick question: what are your thoughts of this in-season tournament of the NBA?
I think the quote from Bones Highland best describes it. He was asked about the in-season tournament, and his response was, "Bro, I don't even know what's going on with this."
It's a gimmick. We'll have to see if it makes any sense, but it's definitely a gimmick.
The games count as regular season games, so I just treat the group stage like a regular season game because that's what it is.
Yeah, and it's not like you're playing teams that you wouldn't play anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why it's even considered an in-season tournament, but okay.
And it kills me because they're doing it like Champions League style.
Oh, yeah.
Out of all the North American leagues to bring a soccer thing in, it's the NBA of all things. And now college football is talking about relegation. But the MLS refuses. We refuse to have relegation. You can have it in college football. Okay, you got soccer things taking North America over, but not the MLS. We're gonna stay true.
Well, I know that they're spending the fact that it's now over $500 million to get anywhere from put it this way, anywhere from $400 million to $700 million to get a team in the Major League Soccer is definitely putting a hefty price on it. But the USL just signed a deal with Paramount, so there'll be a lot of their games on Paramount, with the championship game being on CBS. So there will be an opportunity for people in this country to see the second tier of soccer, and it'll be interesting to see how people take to it.
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll have to see. As the old saying goes, to be determined. We'll let that one go. All right, everybody, have a nice Wednesday. We'll be back tomorrow. There's going to be football tomorrow, and it's going to be interesting. It'll be Joe Burrow and Cincinnati in what, frankly, could be a must-win game against Lamar Jackson and a team from Baltimore that blew one the other day in at home against Cleveland, who is now without Deshaun Watson for the rest of the season. So there you go. Well, and I'm sure that Pittsburgh was more than happy to see that happen because they kicked Cleveland on Sunday. So a Cleveland loss and a Pittsburgh win, and the Steelers have moved back into first place in that division where everybody's over 500. So it'll be interesting. So we'll be there tomorrow night and talk about that game, along with, I'm sure there'll be some good college games, and we'll have some fun stuff. So until then, don't forget, check out all of the wonderful stuff that Amadeus is doing down in the show box below, and we will see you tomorrow, everybody. Take care.